Welcome, friends. I'm Chris. I'm from Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness, and welcome to our Fire and Water Sunrise Yin. Today, we're going to have a focus that's specifically targeted toward helping us to manage the difficult emotions that come up just as part of being a human being. Now, what I think you'll need in order to have a safe and comfortable practice today, a yoga mat would be nice. If you don't have a yoga mat for today, a soft carpeted surface will do well. One or two blankets. I'd like you to have two blocks and a bolster. And we'll get started in just a moment with fire and water, sunrise yin. Get started in a seated position here. We won't stay here long, but I just like for us to breathe together a few times. So set yourself up with really great posture, stacks joints, long spinal column. And let's start with a cleansing breath. On an inhale, drawing a deep, 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 deep breath. As you exhale, think full and complete. As you exhale, make a ha sound. Ah. And let's do that two more times. Inhale. Inhale. And let's start to roll forward. We're going to start this morning in Sphinx pose. So come onto your belly. If you would, have a block, place it in between your wrists at a medium height. Lengthen your legs long behind you. Float your shoulders over your elbows. Maybe flip your palms up toward the stars for now. And then start to soften everywhere except what it takes to keep your shoulders floating over your elbows. And I said the block at the medium height. I'm actually going to adjust mine to the highest height. So feel free to join me there. Soften your glutes, soften your belly, soften your low back, whole legs, everything from your tailbone down to your toes. And invitation, only if it serves you, release your forehead down to a block. And then soften again. So if I'm going to find tension here in Sphinx, it's different for me in Seal. If we add sensation later, it's different for me there. But if I'm going to be gripping in Sphinx, usually it's in my belly. And that's actually probably, I'm finding is the most important area for me to soften for a variety of reasons. Find a comfortable, natural breath. Find a level of sensation, a threshold of sensation that you might describe as sitting right on the verge between discomfort and pain. This metaphor I'm about to share, I heard this first from British poet David Whyte, and I actually believe he was quoting someone else as well. So this is certainly not my idea, and I don't believe it's David's original thought either, but it's a great metaphor. David talks about we each come into this world, and you might visualize it, we have this little black sack that's attached to our hip. And every time we're confronted with something that's difficult, an emotion that we don't know how to deal with, or some kind of a difficulty, instead of dealing with it, often what happens, we end up stuffing it in the sack, which at first seems like a really good strategy. Because this stuff appears to go away, and then we don't have to deal with it. But the trick is, everything that goes into the sack remains because we're not addressing it, we're not dealing with it, we're just stuffing it away. And so at some point in the middle of our life, the metaphor David Whyte uses is where we're walking through the world, dragging along this black sack that started as a little black sack, now is the size of a tractor trailer. And we're trying to like drag it behind us to get into an elevator or get in and out of the car, right? So it loads us, it holds us back like a lodestone. We wonder, why is it so difficult for us to just get around? with a, like, just a normal life, whatever normal means. And I'll talk more later about like what I feel like at this point the 2021 version of Chris Bishop thinks that I need to do in my life with the stuff that's in that black sack. But for now, I'll just leave you with that metaphor. I'm going to shift in the next pose into a different story, and then I'm going to try to weave them together. So about another minute here. If you wanted to add sensation, one way you could turn your palms down, turn your fingers out, press into the palms of your hands, lift your elbows up off the earth, maybe walk the heels of your hands back and towards your waist, and then soften again. Right, so my belly does sometimes tense up here, but the number one culprit, if I'm going to pick up muscular engagement that I don't need when I transition from Sphinx into Seal, are my glutes. So see if you can soften the glutes. Right, and then if you chose Seal, come down into Sphinx, and then lower down onto your belly. I'd just like you to have that block close, and you can tee your arm out to your left arm out to the side. Here, I don't have space. I've got a wall here, so I'm going to goalpost the arm out. So for now, my left elbow's in line with my left shoulder. Fingers are pointing up toward the stars. Rest your left temple on the mat. Place your right hand right under your right shoulder, and then start pressing into your right hand. Lift your right shoulder, float it over your left. Maybe put a bend in that right knee. Step your right foot behind your left knee into wing. So I talk a lot at other times about how mindfulness for me really opened up my whole emotional world in a sense, in that it helped me to understand and I more accurately identify my emotions. Right. And for me, the path to doing that was recognizing where does this manifest in my body? What's the embodied sensation of fear for me versus what's the embodied sensation of shame or what's my embodied sensation of anger? Which was amazing. It was an amazing step for me. All right. If you want more sensation, so I'm cueing this differently than I used to. I used to say, you can come up onto the tips of the fingers of the right hand. You can take your right hand behind your lower back. But what I'm doing now, finding really if I want to add sensation here, I need to lift my right shoulder higher. So for me, turn look more like putting my right hand on. If you have space, you could do that. You could do it at any of the heights of the block. Right. So with mindfulness, what I learned initially is focus, find an anchor to my present moment experience, focus on that anchor, and if anything else came up, notice it, put a label on it, and then come back to the anchor. Right? Which it's a good technique, right? And it's a great starting point. And for thinking, I feel like it worked for me. It works really well. I realized at some point it didn't work so well for me for emotions because what I was really doing, if I'm really honest with myself, what I was really doing is I was seeing an emotion rise, and I'd recognize the emotion. Part of it was based on where it was embodied, where I felt that embodied sensation. All right. If you put something under that, if you put a block under that right hand, remove the block, roll back down onto your right shoulder. And we're just going to sides. So either tee your right arm off to the side or goalpost your right arm out. And then lift yourself up, broken side. But at some the last 2 or 3 years, started to recognize the most came up was recognized, was taking the emotion, basically going, oh, rough, don't want to deal with that right now, stuff that in the black sack. So, let me put one. And for me to be all right, if your body more sensation, at least something under your left hand, maybe any height. When we get this, I'll tell you what I'm seeing. Emotions come. I already mentioned we're the level area that we could describe as or diffuse pressure, that's pull between discomfort and pain. Done in the past, and I'm going to level, and that's how I'm going to show you a more accessible of this. All right, move the block from under your left shoulder, roll back onto your belly. Press yourself up onto your seat. So the two options for where we're going are shoeless in square. So let me show square first. So I'm going to elevate my seat. My pelvis is tipped forward. Bring your right shin parallel to the mat. Hook your ankle on the outside of the right knee. And then the trick is here, the right heel is going to want to keep creeping in towards your groin. When you look between your legs, I don't care how far down this left knee comes, but I'd like you to see a triangle in between your legs, right? So that right heel over and over, you may have to press back out. And then here, you could pad up under that left knee, but I think it'll be easier to increase mobility, maybe placing a block on that, and then the weight of your arms gently tractioning down. So this is one option. The other is shoelace, and this is differently. So I'm going to turn to the side for now. Walk close by. It's almost like a modified tabletop. So right now, my right knee is down on the earth. My left foot is on the earth. Wrap your left knee over your right. Start to widen the ankles out to the side. And then you can place a block up under your seat. Ooh. Sit back onto the block. So for me, this spikes me up to a 7, a pretty high 7. Right, so if that doesn't feel good for you, right, if that's too much sensation, if it's not, by too much, I mean it's not sustainable, choose a different version. If you have lots of space, you can even remove the block and sit down. Take your ankles both closer out to the front. But I'm going to add a 4-8 breath here. So if you're choosing to do this at a higher level of sensation, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale mouth with a ha sound. 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2,
1. Continue with that breath, either a comfortable natural breath or that 4-8 breath. The 4-8 breath really lends itself to the higher levels of sensation. You can do it at any time. It's a pretty relaxing breath for me. We're going to transition to the other side. So I'm going to turn and face the camera for this one. If you forward this, last time my left knee was on the earth, right foot was on the earth. It's going to change sides. Now my left knee, wrap my right knee over my left, widen the ankles out a little bit, and then place my block back between my heels. Sit back on the. So for me to maintain this for the amount of time we're going to stay here, I'm going to need that 4-8 breath. But no, you can also be doing square pose here. That's fine. If it's really easy for you, you've removed the block from under your seat, you still have lots of space. I'm not going to do this. This won't feel good for me, but you can start to walk your hands forward and find a forward fold here as well. So we come to these tools in our life. It's not everybody. People have lots of different motivations for coming to contemplative consciousness, inspiring practices like yoga and meditation. And like, I've yet to hear a motivation I didn't think was a really good motivation. But a lot of times we're coming to this for healing. We're looking for some kind of healing from something in our life that isn't working. But sometimes if we're not careful, I feel like one of the things I've learned from this experience that I shared with you about using mindfulness practice to continue stuffing emotions into a little black sack is these can also be tools for us to bypass dealing with our problems, right? So maybe we're working with our central nervous system so we can tolerate a higher level of something that's really not satisfactory and not okay for us. And that, I think, is not that it's not a good motivation, but I think it's not the point of what we're doing here. And I've tried all the tricks of emotions, anything that looked like it might be a shortcut, anything I could think of anyway, I tried it. It's like, if I find one that works, I'll tell you, I promise. But for now, what I would say is none of the shortcuts seem to work. And as near as I can tell, the only that I found that really gets us past the difficult emotions is through them. So we have to allow ourselves to feel them. So if the mindfulness practice, me, has helped to make it easier to identify your emotion and notice where you're feeling it, like where is this emotion embodied, that's a starting point, and then we figure out how to sit with it. In the Buddhist spiritual tradition, the metaphor, the mythology is that the historical invited his difficulties to sit down and happy with them. What does that look like in our lives? And it's hard. It's hard. That's a part of the reason why I think we don't do it, or we don't do it often, or we don't do it well, is because it's really difficult. But if we can be kind to ourselves and recognize this thing, so this is shame. This is shame. This is where I'm feeling the shame in my body. I see you, shame. And just try not to run away. Try to stay right there for ourselves. All right, we're going to start to come forward out of this. So if your legs are wound, unwind your legs. And we'll set up into a saddle pose. So one block, the lowest height, at least to start. Another block was at 12 to 14 inches. Behind that, maybe not quite that far. At the height, lay your bolster down over the whole kit in caboodle. right? And I'm gonna do a a supported full saddle this morning, but I'm gonna demo a half saddle first. So for the half saddle, fold one knee, say left leg folded back behind me, that knee bent, right leg lengthen out in front, and then bring your lower back onto the bolster. Lay back onto the bolster and just relax as much as you can. Or come onto both knees, tuck both legs back behind you, sit back onto the bolster. If you have lots and lots of space, you could remove the blocks from under your bolster. You could remove the bolster. You could come on forearms here. I am just fine. I have all I could possibly want. Starting in the quads, just above the knees, but actually all the way up into my hip flexor. And then I'm feeling a sense of opening and a creation of space along the front plane of my body. And a little gentle compression in the back line of my body. So sitting T with our different it might look like going to therapy and talking with a professional, or sharing ourselves in a really raw and vulnerable way with someone who has earned the right to hear our story in that way. If you set up into a half saddle, I cued it initially with the left leg back. Your left forearm roll, actually right forearm roll onto the right side, unwind that left leg forward, and then rock onto your left forearm, wind your right leg back behind you. And if you're in some version full saddle, supported or unsupported, and you wanted to add a little sensation, anything that you do that brings the back of your heart closer down to the earth will add. I also like here sometimes taking my arms up over my head and grabbing opposite elbows and having a little bit of additional weight. The forces of gravity drawing, adding that little additional weight back behind me toward the earth. I'm going to start to lift out of the shape. Slide your props out of the way and then find any resting shape on your back with or without the support of props. And then as we transition to our next shape, I'm going to start with like the most and then we'll add levels of sensation depending on what you. So we're going to go into dragonfly. So for most accessible that I'm aware of, place the soles of your feet on the mat first. Draw your seat up against the wall. And then pivot your legs up the wall. Start walking your heels down the wall. So this is a wide-legged seated forward fold. So if you look where we're at with the legs up the wall, we have that shape of the seated wide-legged forward fold, but all the support for the spinal column. All right, so this can be really nice. You could stay right here. Another option is to do this from a seat. So once again, I'm going to choose to elevate my hips a little bit, legs out nice and wide. And then you could stay with your spine up against the wall or just stack joints, head floating over your shoulders, over your hips, over your knees, or you could start to fold forward. And depending on your body, in order to fold forward, you may need some support here. So look like a couple of options. One, especially if you've got a firm bolster or using a couch cushion or something, if you put the head of the bolster up against your heart and the foot of the bolster up against the earth, that might be support to fold forward. Or you could use elbows with or without the support of your bolster on your thighs. And then just use your hands to support. So one option is thumbs on the inside upper edge of your eye sockets, urinary bladder 2. Right, maybe full time. Most likely, if you choose this, it'll just be for a few minutes. Or Macaulay Culkin, right? You bring the heels of your hands together, rest your chin right in between, and just relax your head and neck with all the support from your hands. Right. So task one is to learn to recognize, I feel like, is to learn to recognize our emotions as they arise. Right. And it's tricky because even for ourselves, sometimes there are emotions that we want to believe that we're experiencing rather than what we really are. There are some that have a better public face than others. So when the emotion arises, question one is, where am I feeling this in my, right? And I feel like this sort of, I figured out the emotions first and then I learned more about the chakras. But I think the chakra systems can give us some really good direction on that. If we look at the chakras, location of the chakras and demon scar of each chakra, in most cases, that's a really good indication for me of where I feel the emotion. So starting at the base of the spinal column, we have Muladhara, the root chakra, and the demon of the root chakra is fear. Right, and as it happens, fear for me manifests like a sense of a tight fist being closed in the pit of my stomach. Right, so that matches up really well. That makes sense. Or check in with your body, friends. If you've got all the sensation you could possibly want, don't change a thing. If you're seated forward, you could bring your heart, your head toward the earth. You could tuck your chin closer in toward your chest. You could also take the ankles, the legs out wider. If you're up against the wall, just lower your heels, your ankles lower down the wall. So widen them out apart from one another. And then as we move up the spinal column just a little bit, a matter of inches, we come to Svadhisthana, the sacral chakra. And the demon associated with the sacral chakra is guilt. Right, so I don't know exactly if I've noticed where I feel the embodied sensation of guilt, where that manifests in my body, but The next time it comes up, where I'll be looking for it is somewhere in my groin, somewhere in that area. And then we move up this column and we come to the area of about the solar plexus, and we come to Manipura, the solar plexus chakra. And the demon associated with is shame. Right. And I have noticed that when I experience shame, there's sort of a sinking feeling that does start in the center of my abdomen, and it's like it's dropping down toward my groin to my pelvic floor. Right. So that matches up for me really well. All right, friends, start to lift yourself up. And then make your way onto your belly, have the bolster close by, or rather, in your belly, come into a tabletop. Place the bolster in between your wrists so that about a third of the length of the bolster is down below the wrist. And turn to the outside, so like a goddess squat in the legs, widening your knees out wide. And as you take the knees out wider, widen the ankles out. So some drew a straight line from head to heel, and it went through your knee, it would come back and it would pierce down through the heel. And then from side to side, human nature is gonna want to draw the hips forward, the hips closer to the earth. Keep them stacked up, so from side to side, your hips and your knees are in roughly one line. Lower your down to your bolster. And higher along this tunnel about the heart, we come to Anahata. Anahata is the heart chakra. So here is, so you like good area to look for. I'm going to show you a trick. I feel like my psyche is played on, just starting to figure out. Associated with heart chakra is grief. So where does it benefit your body? Sense that we would feel in the heart, and I feel like that's true for me. And I feel like that's a great heaven to my heart down. Is for me, I feel the foundation of anger for me is also my heart, but it's more of a constrictive emotion. It feels like a closed fist. Just really just starting to put together. What if I've been calling anger all the time, even since I taught my emotions through my practice? Really grief I didn't want to face and recognize as grief. Right? It's possible. And if we move up to the throat level, we come to Vishuddha. This is throat chakra. And the demons associated with the throat chakra are the demons are lies. So when we've had to live a lie, or we're encouraged to help perpetuate a lie, whether it's an individual lie, a lie, a societal lie, or maybe we've recognized a lie that we didn't call out, when I feel a sense of compression in my throat, it usually has something important that my soul needs for me to say. I'm not willing to face up to it and say it. And then the upper chakras, subconscious function, Ajna chakra, third eye, and Sahasrara, the crown chakra, which is the prefrontal cortex, is conscious thought. Offhand, I don't remember what the demons are. I'll look those up. I know one of the difficulties that plagues me sometimes is doubt. Doubt in myself, doubt in other people, doubt in circumstance. Right? And that often manifests headaches for me.
like a pinching sensation in my eyes. Right, so once we identify it, I'm going to use the word just, like it's easy, and it's not easy. We just have to sit and have tea with it. Right, if you want to add more sensation, a couple of thoughts. You could take your knees and ankles out even wider. You could lower your heart or your head closer down toward the earth. Notice the tendency for the hips to scoot forward and see if you can prevent that. And the hips and the knees in one line from side to side. The other thing I'm learning, I had a friend post something about this, so it's written by two sisters who both have doctors, PhDs in different areas. One Nagalski, I think the last name, and the book is Burn. It talks about one of the things that stood out to me is why my practice things. I was practicing yoga, I was meditating, I had a breath practice, and nothing seemed to be enough for my life circumstances. And I just thought if I'm I think that's not what was happening at all. I think it was things. And the first is what I heard called putting up chandeliers in a haunted house. Right. So when we're trying to add these practices to beautify this house, we're putting this chandelier up, but the house itself is not a good place for us to be. Right. Whether that's a job, whether that's a relationship, whatever that looks like, we're trying to add all these other things in to make things better when what really would make things better is us removing ourselves from that situation. That's not what our soul wants for us anymore. It may have been at one time. So it's one thing, but the other thing I really book is that there's this big difference between the stressor, the thing that causes the stress itself, right? And we can remove the stressor. The stressor can be years gone, but we can the stress that was unaddressed, that was not dealt with. Long frog, even if you really love frog, we're going to start to rock forward rather than muscling out. Rather, let the crown of your head come forward until your hips fall back down behind you. Ooh. Walk your legs back behind you. Any resting shape on your belly. For today, I'm going to choose a half frog with my arms goal posted out to the side, elbows in line with my shoulders, fingers pointing up, my right cheek, my right temple on the mat, and draw my left knee in general direction of the elbow. That left knee definitely doesn't have to touch that left elbow. It doesn't even have to be close that direction. All right, friends, lower the knee, back down in line with your lowered knee. Bring your hands under your shoulders. Come on back. Place the soles of your feet on the mat with a generous bend in your knees. Tee your arms out to the side. Walk your hips over to the right.
and then drop your knees off to the left. Twisted root, supine twist. If you would, leave your gaze up toward the stars. Right, so what does that mean, the difference between the stressor and the stress? So this is just sort of an arbitrary example, but let's say I'm going to staff an event today. I leave the event and I get mugged in the parking lot. Somebody holds me up at knife point and takes my wallet. Right, so the stressor is the mugger, she or he, the person who held me up and who took my property, threatened my safety and my well-being. Right, so now the mugger has my wallet, they turn and they run away, and I'm left there in the parking lot with no stressor, but probably still very much facing the reality of the stress. So I'm not in clear danger anymore, but my body doesn't necessarily know that, right? So I'm still in a sympathetic nervous system fight or flight response. So according to this book, Burnout, and the doctors Nogowski, what do we have to do to complete the stress cycle? We have to allow that stress, the path, to exit through our body. Part of that is being here now and feeling, where am I feeling this in my body? Certainly fear. Maybe also some shame or some guilt for not putting up more of a fight for myself in that situation. Right? Where do I feel that? And can I sit with those emotions? That constrictive feeling in the pit of my stomach, and maybe that sinking feeling from solar plexus level down toward my groin. But working through the rest of the stress cycle also might mean talking with a close friend. Again, someone who's earned the right to hear my story. It might look like physical contact. They said a 90-second, like a really close, intimate hug. So not necessarily romantic intimate, just close, unguarded hug can help unlock the stress cycle. And physical exercise, maybe going for a long walk or a run in the evening, would help be a starting point for me working all the way through the stress cycle and releasing the stress associated with that mugging. Right. If you want more sensation, a couple of options. One, you could straighten your right leg, let gravity draw the big toe edge blade of your right foot closer down toward the earth. You could also put your right hand down, grab the top of your left foot, lower your whole left leg and your right arm and your right shoulder down to the mat. And technically, I don't think this will feel good for me, but you could do both of these things at the same time. So all the yoga, meditation, and breath work in the world will not be enough if we're not also allowing ourselves to work all the way through the stress cycle. And I don't know if this is universal, but in my case, then we end up blaming ourselves. Like, this got to be something that I'm doing wrong, right? It's just one little piece, small but very significant piece that we're missing. Right, if you straighten your right leg, put a bend in that knee. If your cat's pulling its tail, release your left foot. Draw your knees back up the center. Walk your hips over to the left. Drop your knees off to the right. If your body wants more sensation, straighten that left leg or take cat pulling its tail with your right foot in your left hand. On your left knee, raise your right foot. Draw your knees up to center. And the last yin shape before our final resting shape is going to be some version of a reclined butterfly. So you can start right here on your back, bring the soles of your feet together. And if you don't have like a really compelling reason not to have blocks under your knees or your thighs, I'd like to see you put them there. That's just my opinion. It's your practice. Right. Another option is to do this with the support of a bolster under your thoracic. So with the bolster laid out long, so that the long edge of the bolster parallel to the long edge of your mat, bring the bottom of your rib cross strap level onto this bolster. And then it might feel good if you do this to kind of goalpost or to take the arms out to the side. I said goalpost, that's not what I meant, just bring them to the side. You could also do this as a heart bench and just replace your bolster with 1 or 2 blocks. Any good story is circular, so the ending brings it back to the beginning. So I don't know if this will be a good story, but I started the discussion today with that metaphor of the black sack on our hip. Right. So if along our journey to consciousness, we start to do a better job of recognizing emotions as they come up, allowing ourselves to feel them, and then we add allowing ourselves to work all the way through the stress cycle, we still have the matter of like sometimes years and years of shit that we stuffed into this little black sack that we need to at some point look at, because we're still dragging that along with us everywhere that we go. Right. So I think this is journaling is an amazing tool for this. So pulling out maybe the big ticket items in there first, that may be where starting where it's easy, or maybe starting where it's easy is pulling out things that are a little easier to face up to. Therapy is an amazing tool for starting to pull trauma and pain out of that little black sack and allow ourselves to feel it with the support of someone else. I worked with a therapist once. She did a technique, it's called EMDR. And the way that it worked is, as homework, I did an inventory of like all the pain and trauma from my life. Any little thing someone else did to hurt me, things that I did to other people that I was stinging from, things that I did to hurt myself, times where I disappointed or let myself down. So these all go into this running timeline. And then in chronological order, the therapist walked me through that. She had me feel where I feel it in my body. And then there's this electrical stimulus that it makes the eyeballs kind of tremor like they do in REM sleep. And that practice is thought to help dispel some of the emotional charge associated with those difficulties from our lives and our past. So I don't know that EMDR is the right tool for everyone. I know it was helpful for me. I don't think I got the full amount of healing that I'd hoped for from it, but I think it was a great starting point. But it's just one tool that's available. And I'll close with the idea that I started with. If the shortcuts, if I thought they would work, I would tell you what they were. But as near as I can tell, the shortcuts, they just don't work. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we say half measures availed us nothing. Right. So to the best of my understanding so far, the only path past these difficult emotions is through them. And we can do this. We can do this with or without support, usually with. You have everything you need to get through that. All right, friends, from here, make your way into your final resting shape. This can be any shape on your seat, your belly, your back, or your side. For me today, I'm going to keep this little bend in my thoracic spine with the bolster under my arms. I'm going to lengthen my legs long. And I'm going to reach my arms out over my head with my forearms supported on the bolster, grabbing opposite forearms. Start to draw some deeper breaths. Filling up belly and your chest on your inhale. Seeking full and complete exhales. Start to add an element of movement to your day. Things small, maybe things like wiggling of your fingers and your toes, or an action of drawing your chin from shoulder to shoulder. And if more movement would feel good, I invite you at any time to go larger, rotating your hands at the wrists, your feet at the ankles, maybe taking a full body stretch. And then roll over to this position. Check in and just notice what's the quality of your central nervous system right now. Maybe compare how it was started. Just notice the difference. And you don't have to do any information except and press yourself up into a seated position, any seated position. I'm going to thumbs and sternum hands are center. You could do that. You could do anything you like with your hands. Eyes open, closed. Thank you, friend, for joining me this morning, allowing me to guide you through your practice. I appreciate your energy, your breath, practice, and your friendship. If you like, draw your thumb this house. Blessings to you and your family. And that concludes our practice for this morning. Friends, I'm Chris. I'm with Transformation Yoga. Thank you for joining us this morning for our Fire and Water Sunrise Yin practice.